Everyone, we have two more presentations for the day. So I'm excited to announce Dr. Dawn Merrett, who is a former music teacher turned clinical researcher with a master's and PhD in clinical neuropsychology from the University of Melbourne, studying how singing training affects the brain in healthy adults and stroke patients. Now a postdoctoral fellow at BRAMS at the University of Montreal and TMU. And SingWell, she researches music-induced neuroplasticity and singing's benefits for health and well-being. Thanks for being here, Dawn.
Thank you. All right, I am really happy to bring you some very fast updates about two studies that SingWell has provided some support for. I'm not quite sure how to cover two very big studies in the short time that we have, so I'm going to give it a go. But if I can't get through everything or there's things that are unclear about the methodology, please ask for clarification, or if you're interested, you can come find me after, and I'm happy to provide more details. So first I'm going to talk about the group versus solo singing study, which is the very first study that SingWell provided some support for our lab. And I think that we all kind of believe that there's something special about group singing. Although any kind of singing, whether it's in a group or by yourself, has the potential to impact your mood and your physiology through so many different mechanisms, group singing has some potential extra ingredients that solo singing doesn't have, right? Including the opportunity to synchronize with and bond with others. So it's not really surprising that the studies that have compared group and solo singing have come out in favor of group singing. But a few years ago when I was reviewing the literature, I was really surprised to realize that all of the studies that are doing these comparisons had actually used existing choirs. And then out of that, they took people who were used to singing together as their solo samples. So that could provide some potential bias, because I do think that those people who were used to singing together would not really enjoy singing on their own. So I designed a study to try to look at this fundamental question in an unbiased way, and that could also investigate many of the mechanisms that have been proposed in the literature for the health and well-being effects of singing, including feelings of like competence and ability to sing, and expectations about singing, movement, synchrony, bonding, breathing, and more, but I'm not going to get to talk about all of those today. Sorry, my slides do not want to advance. So what we did for our group versus solo singing study, just a quick recap for those who are not familiar with this study, we recruited participants who didn't have much experience with singing. They had less than 2 years of previous choir singing or vocal lessons, and they were not currently singing in a choir. And after bringing them into the lab to get familiar with how the study works and what it feels like to sing there, we randomized them into two conditions: group singing in small groups of 4 and solo singing. And we asked them to come in for weekly sessions. Now, the groups of 4 were pragmatic. It was during the pandemic, and we knew that if they allowed us to do any group singing, it would be needing to be in small groups. But also, we wanted to collect synchronized physiological measures and could only do that with a small group. We didn't have enough devices that we could synchronize together to do a large choir. So when the participants came to the lab, they were fitted with ECG sensors and a breathing strap in our battery-operated BRAMS bioboxes. And that allowed us to capture ECG and breathing metrics while participants were able to move freely. And we collected the physiological data throughout the session, but we also included a minute of rest before and after they did their singing. And this was especially important when we realized how noisy the ECG was when the participants were moving normally. As they would sing, they would take a drink of water, they would run their hands through their hair, and every time they did this, you could not find their heartbeat. So we had to make sure that we had that resting minute in there where we got better quality data. And we also collected pre and post saliva samples to measure stress hormones, as well as self-reported mood, connectedness, and motivation measures. So after they did all of their pre-data collection, we had them sing novel songs that were learned with the help of a facilitator for about 40 minutes each week. Now, unfortunately, we had a hard time recruiting participants that could commit to 4 weekly sessions at the same time. So forming the groups was incredibly hard, and keeping those groups together. And so in the end, our sample size was only 15 in the group condition and 12 in the solo condition after 10 months of recruitment. And that was much smaller than what we anticipated. But I will tell you what data we have been able to see so far. So at last year's SingWell Symposium, I put up this slide demonstrating our findings across the 3 primary well-being outcomes in our study. So we showed a clear self-reported mood boost after singing that was not different between group singers and solo singers. But we were also eager to look at more objective measures that might not have some of the biases that are in self-report. And so we were looking at cortisol, and our preliminary results for that showed a significant decrease that didn't vary again between the groups. And then at last year's symposium, I had these big question marks because we were still working on the heart rate variability data. So as I said, given the noise in the data, we focused entirely on the minute of rest pre and post singing. We still don't know whether or not we're going to be able to kind of look at that data while they're singing, or whether it's just too noisy to trust. But we hypothesized that heart rate would decrease and heart rate variability would increase after singing, as measured with one of the most standard HRV measures for short measurement windows. So that would be RMSSD, or the root mean square of successive differences of the R peaks that are in the heart signal. So we used the free open source software artifact and checked that the R peaks were correctly identified, and we did make manual corrections where necessary, and thankfully, in most cases, the data was very clean. And this is what we found. Here are the change scores for heart rate. So the change scores meaning we've subtracted pre from post, with beats per minute on the y-axis and session or week on the x-axis. So we had never planned to include session 0 in the repeated measures analysis. This was the familiarization session before they actually get randomized. But we did capture the heart rate and HRV on this session to make sure that the groups were sort of equal at baseline before they were randomized. And we also excluded session 1 from our analysis when we realized that those who were singing in a group had a very much more stressful experience in week 1 because they were meeting their group members for the first time. And it was very different than what the solo singers experienced because they were coming in and pretty much doing the same thing that they had done in their familiarization session, whereas the group singers had to get adjusted to doing this in a group capacity. So we have focused our analysis on weeks 2, 3, and 4. And there was a significant main effect from before to after singing, from pre to post, when we consider those sessions, with an average difference of only 2.8 beats per minute less after. But given that the variance wasn't too high, it is an effect size of standardized effect size of 0.5, a medium effect. We didn't find any significant effects of condition, so group and solo were not significantly different, although I kind of think there's an interesting looking trend here, and it just might be a power issue, maybe. For the RMSSD, the average change for sessions 2 to 4 was 2.7 milliseconds. That's about an 11% change and gives us a small effect size of 0.3. Now, after we removed an outlier with an extreme change score from session 2, we didn't actually see a significant difference between pre and post. This data is pretty variable. You can see we've got pretty big error bars happening here. And you can also see that there really aren't any significant group or session effects. Just as a sanity check, we did look at this, and RMSSD negatively correlated with age. That's what we would expect to see, but not with music training, and it didn't vary significantly by gender. So our question now is, how do we interpret this finding? With the lack of consistent group or session differences, and without having a do-nothing control group, I don't think it's quite possible for us to know whether these really small pre-post changes in heart rate and a not really significant RMSSD change, whether they're linked to singing or whether they maybe simply reflect slightly stressed participants who calm down over the course of the hour that they're in the lab. So it's hard to know exactly what is leading to this. We also have to consider whether the effect size is actually meaningful. And to kind of try and think about this, I looked at a recent meta-analysis of RMSSD with exercise interventions. And they found average changes of about this size from pre to post-exercise. And the effect didn't really reach significance when they were applying their meta-analytic techniques. But there have been some suggestions in the literature that changes of this magnitude could still potentially be clinically meaningful. So I think the next step in determining what this might mean would be to compare changes over time in participants who sing and then in participants who do some other activity to see whether these small effects actually hold and whether they're just situational anxiety from having to come into the lab that resolves, or whether they are improvements that are linked to singing, even if they're kind of small. And if the data quality is good enough, we really hope to be able to look at this in our newcomer randomized controlled trial, where we collected PPG data using optical sensors. And I'll talk a little bit about that study if I've got time, but that would be a kind of a nice next step, is to have something that has a good control group where we can actually start to interpret this better. And obviously, if I had a little bit more data, I think that this would help clarify things a little bit too. But this is what we've got so far. So I would like to report that the answer to the question, is group singing better than solo singing for promoting well-being, is maybe not. We have looked at 3 outcome measures: self-reported mood, stress hormones, and heart rate variability, and not found significant differences so far between solo and group. Now, obviously, there's some caveats to this. We have a small groups, and that might not be quite the same as being immersed in a large choir. But the self-report of our participants was that they still really enjoyed the group experience, and they did experience that sense of group blend. So I do think we're at least part of the way there to actually forming a group and giving people the experience of group singing. And the other caveat that I should mention is that there are things that we haven't looked at yet. I mean, these are just 3 potential measures of well-being. There's a lot of other things we could look at. We could look at oxytocin, maybe, and those might show a difference between group and solo singing. But so far, I'm pleased to report, if you don't have a chance to sing as part of a group, singing by yourself looks to be really good for you too. So I think that's really encouraging from a clinical perspective. When we think about the possible implications of this for how we structure singing-based interventions, it's really good to know that both group and solo singing are things that can boost your mood and potentially reduce your stress and improve your physiology. So I think that is pretty exciting. The next thing I'd like just to share just a little taste of some of the data that we have coming from the newcomer randomized controlled trial. So we are doing a study that came from the brain of Isabelle Peretz, who had this intuition that probably some of the main needs that new immigrants might have would actually line up really well with some of the things that we know that group singing helps with. So things like boosting mood, helping maintain well-being, helping you to learn a new language. We have evidence, even from people in this room, that singing can actually probably help with acquiring new vocabulary and pronunciation. And then also helping to bond people together. We know that music has a little bit of an ice-breaking effect and really helps to create quick social bonds. And so all of these things, like integrating socially into a new society, learning the new language, maintaining your physical and mental well-being, these are all really important needs of people who are moving to a new country. So we wanted to provide the best quality evidence possible. I'm not even going to talk today about the proof of concept study that we did, where we already saw some really interesting outcomes. There's a preprint online if you're really interested in looking at that. But we had this idea that if we could do a randomized controlled trial where we can provide gold standard evidence about the efficacy of group singing to improve second language acquisition, well-being, and social connectedness, relative to a control condition, then we would have a better chance of potentially influencing policy. So we are having these questions. I mean, once we have answered the main question about efficacy, we also want to look at mechanisms and how they might be related across domains, but that's really when we have our big data set and we can do some mediation analyses and things. So our study design was a pragmatic, multi-site, 3-arm randomized control trial. We're doing a 6-month follow-up. We have a choir group. They sing together every week. A conversation class where they speak together every week about music topics so that we could actually tell immigrants and refugees who are kind of applying to be part of this study, you're going to be randomized to a music activity or to a waitlist control, and then you can join a music activity after. Our goal was to get 120 newcomers within 5 years of arrival, over age 16, with a few local residents included to foster mutual inclusion. That was the goal. The measures that we were looking at were behavioral, self-report, and biological outcomes, all integrated together across the domains of language and well-being and social connectedness. So we did, here I've got 12 weeks, but for pragmatic reasons, we're in this multi-site, we've had 2 sites so far. One did 10 weeks, another did 12 weeks, and they do these choir conversation activities for 2 hours per week, ideally in groups of about 20 to 25. And then we did data collection in terms of language and surveys, self-report surveys at baseline and at completion. And then they've been talking a lot about these micro-session kind of measures where they're testing before and after singing, and we did the same thing. You're getting physiological measures and mood and social connectedness before and after 3 sessions throughout the weeks of choir. By combining objective indicators with subjective reports, we're hoping that we can account for potential demand characteristics and individual backgrounds and kind of capture how participants feel about their involvement and how that translates into measurable changes in functioning. So for language tasks, we were primarily focusing on pronunciation, fluency, and vocabulary, using a sentence repetition task and picture description task. We also took self-reported proficiency and competence. For well-being, we looked at heart rate variability, as I said, with optical sensors to capture PPG, and then salivary cortisol, self-report scales of mood, stress, and quality of life, and also social connectedness. We were looking at the inclusion of other in the self scale. It's another self-report measure that's easy for people who, it's not very linguistically challenging. And salivary oxytocin and video analyses of group interactions. So that's a lot right there. And then not even to mention all the demographics and prior music experience and language class enrollment. And so there was a lot of data. We've done 2 sites to date, Toronto and Montreal. Now the Toronto site was, target language was English, and in Montreal the target language is French. We randomized 188 participants. And so we had hoped that that would leave us with 120, but unfortunately only 82 of them completed at least 50% of the sessions. And the 6-month follow-up with these participants who completed at least 50% of the sessions, we're hoping that will be finished by early January. And our data analysis is in progress, and we have some preliminary results available, so I'm just going to touch on a couple of quick things. We saw, this is from the Montreal site, that positive mood was boosted by being in one of the activity groups with a greater increase in the choir group. As you can see, the slope of the changes from pre to post is higher in the choir group. And when it says session 1, 2, 3, that just refers to like the early microsession, then the middle microsession, and then the final microsession. For social connectedness, again, participation in the activities led to higher levels of social connectedness compared to the waitlist, although by the final session, there wasn't any difference between choir and conversation. And the perceived competence and confidence in speaking English significantly increased, with no difference between the choir and the conversation group. So this is their own feelings about their language. So when we did, actually, we've gotten a little start on the objective language measures. And what we found was a trend towards an improvement in pronunciation scores on the sentence repetition task, but it actually, it wasn't actually a significant difference, just kind of a trend, and it was identical for both groups, both conversation and choir. This is brand new, hot off the press analysis as well. And we can see, this is a little bit difficult to interpret, but participation in the activity seems to promote a trend toward lower cortisol levels by the final session. And it does seem that there is probably a difference between choir and waitlist in that third session, but we didn't actually have enough power, I don't think, to see interaction effects, and there wasn't really a main effect of group. So we just see a pre-post difference, main effect. So we'll kind of let you know more about these biomarkers as we kind of figure out exactly what's going on here. Just quickly, qualitatively, the people who participated really loved being in the choir and conversation groups and said that they would recommend what they did as a way to learn the language and connect with others. And when we asked them if they wanted to keep doing it, the majority of the participants wanted to continue singing if they were in the choir group. But the majority also wanted to switch to singing if they were in the conversation group. So even though the conversation group people said that it was really useful and that they would recommend it, they still wanted to switch to singing. And that suggests to me that the idea of group singing is appealing to newcomers. So when they were asked if what they would change or didn't like about the activities, most said nothing. But some said they wanted the activities to be longer or occur more often or include homework for them to do. So I feel like this is incredibly positive. And in Montreal, there was a newcomer choir that was offered this fall for participants to either continue in or for those who had been in the conversation or waitlist groups that wanted to try singing. And 22 of our previous participants came to that first session. So they weren't just saying that they wanted to continue, many of them actually did. So both choir and conversation activities appear to improve language, well-being, and social connectedness compared to waitlist control. And analyses across both of the sites and analysis of the physiological measures and additional language measures, that's ongoing. So I will be very excited to bring you more finalized data. But the bottom line for us is that so far, if we see that singing in a choir is at least as effective as conversation classes in improving language and social connectedness. Plus, we see that the newcomers seem to prefer it, and they also feel happier when they're doing it. So in that case, if you've got equivalence in these objective measures, but you've also got this sense that they like it better, I think that that means that we can look to group singing as a potential helpful strategy in promoting newcomer language acquisition and integration. So, thank you very much. This obviously is a huge multi-site study, and it takes a lot of people to do it. So in addition to the big team that we have, Isabel started working on this years ago, and now we have this beautiful collaboration with Frank and Arla and SingWell and Bridging Divides. And we have people, Isabel Hero from UQAM, and so many students who have contributed to this. Fida Akrut is the PhD student on this. And our amazing choir and conversation class facilitators, like Tiffane and Carl and Gwenna and Maria, and even in my study, Leah, like these were amazing people without whom we couldn't have done this study. And we had our community partners, the Corporation of Massey Hall, Roy Thompson Hall, and Community Music Schools of Toronto, who also made it much more feasible here in Toronto for us to be able to recruit participants, and they provided space for our sessions and just in general supported making it possible to get a big study like this done. Because when you have all at one time 60 people there in two groups and you've got to collect all this data from all of them, you can imagine it takes so many, and we're just so grateful to all of the people who made it possible. And of course, thanks to our funders.
Thanks, Dawn. You were able to cover two very big projects.
Yes,
Thank you.
I took a little not too much time, but they did tell me that there was extra time, so they said I could take a little more.
They're still packing the beer into the fridges, so we're okay on time. We'll take the one in the room first, and then we'll come to the Zoom. Okay. Yeah, there's a mic coming behind you.
Thanks, Don. That's amazing. I'm just curious, what are your objective measures of language learning?
So we have a sentence repetition task and a picture description task, so that from the sentence repetition task, what we're hoping to extract is pronunciation. So we were using the kind of elicited imitation task form, where you have them repeat a sentence, and then we're using two different kinds of rating, both human rating and just checking that is converging across multiple human raters, but then also looking at using automated speech transcription tools, so AI-based stuff, to be able to actually see how many words, because we have a ground truth, we know what sentence was read out to them, and then we see when they say it back, how many words the AI correctly detects. And in our proof of concept study, it was amazing how convergent these were with human ratings. So that may actually be something really helpful to speed up scoring these kinds of tasks. So that was pronunciation. And then in the other one, it's connected speech. So we're looking at things like the number of words and like speech rate and fluency. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the AI stuff from CRBLM workshop, I think. But can the AI be biased towards certain accents, like pick up less words from people with different types of accent, or is it not like?
That's a really good question. We believe that since many of these have been trained on a really wide corpus, that hopefully that isn't the case. But we're hoping to, Frida Akrud is trying to work on a study now where she'll hopefully be able to take this into account and see, are there differences in, like human ratings compared to AI-based ratings, like automated transcription ratings? Are there differences that are driven by language of origin? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And we have an online question from Alexis. Do you believe someone's level of introversion or chronic social anxiety may affect their results and preference between solo and group singing?
It's a very good question. I definitely do think that your preferences would play a role, but it was really interesting. Most people believe that both solo singing or group singing would help them. We asked about their expectations before they started the study and just kind of said, hey, some research evidence says that group singing can help, and some research evidence says solo singing would help. What do you think? And they universally expect both to be very helpful. There's the odd person who thinks that one is better than the other, and there wasn't really enough for us to have good power to determine this, but on the surface of things, it doesn't really look like as if that played a role.
Okay, so thank you for the transparency in the data. It's really thorough. Thank you for a great talk. I have a model that in my head that I'm hoping you can disrupt, because you're close to this data. So my model is that the ability of singing to regulate our autonomic nervous system, I think it's very biomechanical. And I don't think it matters if you sing in a group or you sing in the shower, or you sing in your car. I don't think it matters. I think it has to do with the phrasing in at least simple songs that involves inhalation and controlled exhalation, which is something that many breathing exercises do to promote relaxation. If I think about the way that I breathe when I'm nervous, it's shallow breathing, I'm biting my shirt, I'm doing all kinds of nonsense, and singing doesn't allow for that. So that makes sense to me, but when I think about the social connectedness piece, I do see that group singing offers something that solo singing does not. You kind of concluded that, on the basis of what I'm seeing, I cannot conclude that there's a difference in psychological or social, I don't know how you framed it, well-being between group and individual. But do you have all the data? Like, do we need more data when it comes to social connectedness specifically? And is it fair, you already alluded to this, is it fair to throw group singing under the bus when you brought people into a cold laboratory and asked them about how connected they feel with other people? It would be quite different from many other singing environments.
Okay, so that's a good question. See, I wasn't really including social connectedness as a well-being measure. I was thinking well-being in terms of, physiology and possibly mood, like mental health well-being, but I wasn't including social connectedness. But of course, it's going to be related. And I asked people about their level of connectedness, but if you're singing by yourself, the only people you could feel connected to is maybe the other researchers in the room. So I can't really give a fair comparison regarding that. So I think there's still more work to be done in figuring out, how group works in forming the social bonds and how much that plays into your overall, sense of well-being, for sure. No disruption to your model. I'm pretty sure that sounds pretty sound.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad we're completely aligned. Okay, thank you so much. That was a great talk, Dawn.